These cards feature some of the really incredible artwork pertaining to my life and my career. It's been very exciting.
Hey everybody, this is Perch, talking about comic business. Here's a question. It's a question this question has been asked a million times in a million different ways. And I think it's not helped by kind of the general bias of where people want to go. Now, just to be clear, the question I'm about to read, I don't think the person behind it is got a bias. I don't think they're out for kind of an agenda. But the reality is, and we have to accept this, or you have to face it, that a lot of YouTube channels, a lot of commentary on comics has almost been forced into taking one of two positions. Things are better than ever, everything is awesome, or everything is failing, everything is bad, everything is a disaster. There was the leak, the inside source, somebody who somehow worked for both Marvel and DC, who was talking about how Zaslav was coming in demanding to see sales figures and everything. He was going to cut down comics and reduce the line. Well, here we are looking at the solicitations for March, and DC is full steam ahead with more comics than ever before, and plenty of comics that are not meat and potatoes characters, but rather exploring different things. Apparently, there's a Alan West and Family comic coming out soon. All the conversations about how Marvel, there was going to be crackdowns and fewer books, and we've got something called the Snikt family, which is Laura Kinney and Dakin on some kind of family adventure, which is easily the dumbest shit I've ever heard in my life. But there you go, it's a digital only comic. So, but it'll get printed and we'll all be forced to read this garbage. We won't be forced to read this garbage. I'm just saying, despite predictions regularly of the comic industry's imminent demise, it keeps plugging along. So we can call it a zombie, we can call it shitty, we can call it anything else, but the real question starts to become, how is that business working? And it's a good one. How in the world, in an era where we're getting the Snikt family or X-Men Green or some of the other stuff that's just bizarrely off the rails in terms of content, how is that still possible? That what is going on? And that is where a lot of the theories come out of, like Disney is just secretly bankrolling a dying business in order to somehow turn all the frogs gay. But the reason why people come up with those theories is because they cannot rationalize in their mind why any company would be doing this. They just can't. They can't come to that. They just can't come to that understanding. And it's hard to accept that the simple answer is probably the correct one. And the simple answer is, it's making just enough money to kind of limp past profitability. And it's also so little importance to the parent company that they're willing to let it just kind of plod along. And, as long as the costs aren't high, do what you got to do. And so it's really a mixture of incompetence and laziness that's driving a lot of the decisions, a lot of the factors. That's a hard thing to wrap your head around. And if you're a fan of comics, if you're a collector of comics, that's not really how you want to think about this hobby you've invested money in your life into, as the thing that nobody really gives too much of a shit about at a corporate level, and are willing to to more or less just let it ride because it's not hurting them badly enough. I mean, that's a very bizarre place to settle in on. But anyway, this mail is asking kind of the same question. It goes, "Hello, Perch, aka the Texan who records podcasts about comics while driving and regularly complains about unsafe driving habits of his fellow Texans." What are you trying to say there? Anyway, it's me, the guy who really likes Cassandra Cain. I hope this mail finds Perch, international man of mystery. Well, if not, well, what can one do about it? Yeah, fair enough. Again, no, I like Cassandra Cain. I do. Anyways, this mail isn't about you and Cassandra Cain for once. It's about the mainstream American comic book industry. See, for some strange reason, I was reminded of an interview Stephen Colbert held a decade or so ago. He was interviewing a very old-timey news anchor. I was incredibly, revered toward the guy. Not that I can recall his name. That's usually how it goes. And one question in particular, though, I still remember. How was it to have the whole nation tune in to hear you speak every night? For those in your audience who don't get it, before cable and satellite TV, most countries only had one or two TV stations. Yes, just one or two. I think the US was special and it had three. This is before my time, though, I will say. But anyway, so if you had a successful show at the time, that meant that most people with a TV would be watching you, i.e., the most of the viewing public would be watching just one person. Certainly, this was true of the news. What does that have to do with comics? Well, given that an ever increasing number of comics being published today and the ever dismal sales number for any one comic, is there a chance the American mainstream comic book industry reached a plateau when it comes to readership? And the reason why no comic is doing as well as its predecessors used to is because a limited number of readers have a limited amount of cash they can spend, so each only selects the titles that interest them the most. Okay, there's a flaw in this logic, but we'll continue with it. Have mainstream comic sales been declining as a whole, or have only per individual titles, while sales in general are doing as well as they've ever done? I know you're the numbers guy when it comes to comic sales on YouTube. If someone can find the answer to this, it's probably you. Okay, so the way you would look at this, if you're trying to get to facts about the numbers and everything else, is you'd look at the total revenue, the total incoming revenue of a Marvel, say, and you would compare it to the total revenue of Marvel back in the 80s. And what you would do is you would say, is, first of all, your first metric, is a number going up? Were we 100 million, 10 years ago, and we're 150 million now? Is that what's happened? Is that what's occurred? If so, we could say that the business is growing, and then you would look into, well, what are the factors for that business growth? And typically, if you're an investor, if you're somebody in kind of the business segment, what you would want to see is optimization around costs and product, meaning you would want to see higher revenue margin, higher profit off of each individual thing being sold. So if you had, if you were selling 20 comics and you are making $10 million, and then you sold 15 comics and made $40 million, you would say, hey, that's a growth business, it's an optimization business, because the amount of product that you're having to manage, and in theory, if you can tie cost to product, which in this case you can, because every single product, we aren't fully into AI art and editing just yet, but God, bring it on. But anyway, you can basically make an assessment that says, the rate of increased cost and complexity in our product line, the percentage is lower than the rate of revenue, meaning we're making more money by product. We're making, we've basically optimized, grown an audience, we're making more money per product. That is not what's happening here. So kind of to get into a little bit of what you're saying, the money has gone up. If you look at Marvel and you look at their incoming, you'll see that revenue has increased. Total revenue has increased to the company. But what has also increased is product. The amount of product being sold is dramatically higher. The margin of which that product is sold and made is lower. So the amount that the company is taking home is lower. And where the revenue is coming in has been diversified, and that is a good thing. But it also, if you're going to truly compare apples to apples, you need to look at Marvel's comic book business, and you need to be able to segment or filter to see the floppy business, the trade business, the licensing business, the attach rate deals that are happening to video games and other things. You have to look at all pieces of the business, and you can't just look at a total figure, because what's happened is Marvel has opened up additional licensing opportunities and additional cross-promotional opportunities. They've opened up new revenue streams that have a higher margin than traditionally what they've got off of comics. So you could look at that and say, hey, the business has grown, that's good, but it's kind of misleading, because the business has grown most in places outside of actual comics being published. And this is where you get into a bit of a semantic argument, which is, if a comic business grows and expands, but not through comics, is that truly growth or expansion? Well, you can answer that question two ways. If a company is out to make money, however it makes money, there's been plenty of companies that set out to sell a particular product and discover that they've stumbled across a better, healthier revenue stream in another area. Here's one example of which kind of a weird example, but Amazon, as a storefront, certainly grew up and made a lot of money, and that is where the bulk of their money comes in. However, in doing so, they made enablement technologies for themselves and decided to get into the cloud business where they could own data. And that's Amazon Web Services, or AWS. That business is a multi-billion-dollar business now, AWS. It's at least there's a lot of speculation that in time, the AWS cloud business may be higher than their commerce business, their regular storefront business. It depends on where things go. But if you're on the street, you're looking at an evaluation of that company, a lot of people value the AWS business much higher than the commerce business because they believe that Walmart, market fluctuations, how people buy products, all this other stuff are competitors and threats that will change and ultimately drive down the margin they make off that. AWS, the web servicing business, on the other hand, is highly scalable and highly sticky if companies actually leverage it. So if you're Amazon, you would be a jackass if you're in there going, well, you're a multi-billion-dollar company, but you can't really count all that AWS, revenue. You can't count that. That's not fair. Why not? A company should be able to do it at once. If Marvel is making a ton of money off of licensing, good for them. That's not cheating. That's what corporations should do. They should move into these directions where they can make more money. So that's one way to answer the question. The other way to answer the question is, yeah, but if we're talking about comic books, the actual product of a comic book, and we're talking about quality of it, and we're talking about how much money it makes, then we do have to filter out all those things that aren't comic books so we can truly have an apples-to-apples comparison of where the business is going. And that's where you go. So to your point, is it flatlining? It is. I think that the volume of comics out there are certainly diversifying what people are buying, and therefore you're not seeing as high a numbers as a result. However, this should be true for what's typically called in business. It's true of the 75%. The challenge is we're 75%. So basically, you should see a core top line of comics that are selling in the 200 to 300,000 copy range without variant covers and gimmicks and other things. You should see some comics hitting that all-in market in much the same way that Netflix puts out lots and lots of shows, but every now and then they put out Stranger Things or Wednesday, and it lots of people come to that. It spikes the numbers higher than their average. So I've used this expression before. Netflix and a lot of companies do an approach called mini shots on goal. And mini shots on goal means you take lots of swings at the plate. You take lots of business risks in the hopes that 1 out of 10 makes it big. The challenge I think you have with comics is none of the shots are making it big without kind of variant collector schemes that artificially juice up the number. What should happen is you should see 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 20, whatever that metric is, of comics do really, really well, and you're not seeing that. So if you truly had a kind of a diversification strategy that was flatlining the sales and causing distribution of spin to go lots of different places, you would see kind of abnormalities every now and then cracking the 150, 200K number. Because that's the number the business was achieving back in the 80s. It was achieving in the 90s. It was achieving those kinds of volumes every now and then. You don't see that anymore. And the safe bet is that it's not even possible to hit that area anymore. So that's kind of how things have shifted. Anyway, there you go. Thank you for the question. Good question. And let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like and subscribe, of course. And thanks for listening.